All right, we are at the Mishnah on Chaf Testament Aleph with our sponsors for Daf Yomi of the month, Duvi and Tehillah Catcher, B'schus Refuah Shlema for Ephraim ben Shifra. We start a new topic, Ketzad Bodkim Es Ha'idim. How are we going to investigate these witnesses to hope they're telling us the truth and what they're saying? So, Mishnah says, Hayu Machnisin Osan L'Cheder, we would bring the witnesses into a room, Uma'aymin Alehen, and we would cause them to have fear. Would scare them a little bit. Then we're going to take everybody outside, and then and then we're going to start investigating the first of the witnesses, whoever is the more senior of the witnesses. How do you know that so-and-so owes the other person? Im Amar hu, Amar li, shani chayav lo. Let's say the witness says, well, he told me that he owes him the money. Ish ploni amar lishu chayav lo, or somebody told me that he's obligated the money. Lo amar klum. That's just hearsay. That's not a real testimony. That's not acceptable. Ad sheyomar befanenu hodalo shu chayav lo masayim zuz. Until the testimony is something like this. He says, we were assigned as witnesses, and in front of us, he admitted that he's obligated to pay 200 zuz. That's considered to make him a witness. V'achar kach, after that, machnisin es hasheni. Then we bring the second witness in. So the second witness is not present when the first witness is giving his testimony, because we don't want him to hear what the first guy said, so that he'll repeat it, right, for the sake of making sure that the testimony is correct. So we investigate him. If their stories check out with each other, nos in venostin badavar, then the Beis Din is going to investigate the matter. Shnaim omrim zakai ve'echad omer chayav. If two of them say that he is that he wins, that the zakai, that he comes out in favor, then one says that he's obligated to pay zakai. Then the 2-1, the two wins. Shnaim omrim chayav, two say that he's obligated to pay, ve'echad omer zakai, and the other says that he doesn't have to pay. So then he's chayav, then he does have to pay. Echad omer chayav, ve'echad omer zakai. Now let's say it's 1-1, and the third judge says, I don't know. Afilu shnaim mezakin or shnaim mechayiv, and even if two say that he's obligated, or two say that he's not obligated, ve'echad omer eini yodea, and the third judge says, I don't know. So then the third judge is like removing himself from the case, and you need 3 people to judge. So therefore, only having 2 left, you have to go through a process called Yosifu Hadayanin. We're going to add more judges into the case in order to be able to make sure that we get a proper verdict.
How can the judge not know if he
sounds like himself? Well, it sounds like the third judge isn't sure, based on what he knows from the case, whether he can trust this witness or he can't trust the witness, or what the case would be in this. What would the answer be? So he just says, I don't know. So he's out. So we're going to bring witnesses. We're going to bring new judges in instead. Machlokas between the Rishonim, how this exactly works. Whether we're going to bring 2 more judges in, and that way the Beis Din goes from 3 to 5 to keep a odd number in Beis Din, or according to the Ramban, whether we're just bringing 1 in, because after all, at the end of the day, we do have 2-0 right now. We bring 1 more, and now we have 3, and that would be the number that we need. So, Machlokas Rishonim, most I think believe that we bring 2 in, so that the whole court, because that way, if this judge who says I don't know changes his mind and decides he does know, we still have an odd number of Beis Din. Gamru asadavar. Now the court is going to deliberate. They now can make a conclusion. Hay machlisin osan. They would bring everybody. They would bring them back in. We're going to see who them is. Hagodol shebadayonin omer. The most senior of the judges says, Ish ploni ata zakai, ish ploni ata chayav. You so and so you win and you lose. They decide the case. Uminayin lekeshe yetze lo yomar ni mezake v'chavrei mechayvim. How do you know that the judge shouldn't say to one of the litigants, I was on your side, right? But the other guys, what am I supposed to do? Those guys, aval ma'aseh shechavrei rabu alai. So they outnumbered me. I would have voted for you, but what am I supposed to do? On this, the pasuk says, "Lo seich racha ba'amecha." You shouldn't be a talebearer amongst your nation. Holech racha megala. So somebody who is a talebearer reveals secrets. That is the avera of rechilus. Not a good thing to be doing. Says the Gemara, "Heichi amrinan lehu." So what do we say to the person, these witnesses, in order to scare them? We want to scare them a little bit, make sure that they take their testimony seriously. So what do we say? Amar Yehuda, Hachi Amrina, this is what we say. Nesiim ruach v'ruach v'geshem Ein ish mishala b'masa sheker. He says that a person there should understand that the wind and the rain and the clouds and everything will not. There's going to be no rain if people are telling lies in courts. So therefore, you're going to cause a drought if you come to court and you testify falsely. So take it very seriously.
Isn't that a line? Because you're scaring them at the same time you're lying to them.
Well, you're not lying to them, right? That's what the pasuk says. Pasuk says that is in fact what will happen. Person's lying, then Hashem will punish the people. So Amar Rava says, but that's not going to scare anybody because Yachli Lememar, a person could say, Shev Shani Hava Kafna Ba'abava Umana Lo Chalif. A person might think, you could have 7 years of famine and the workers not going to hit the workers. Meaning, look, we've got wildfires in California and I'm not a real estate agent in California. So at the end of the day, it's not going to hit my pocketbook. If you're a carpenter and it doesn't rain, you're still going to get work. So therefore, it might not scare the witness to know that there will be a drought because it might not hit his pocketbook. Elam Rava says instead, I'm reading, we say to him, Mapetz v'cher v'chetz v'shanun ish ona b'reihu eid sheker, that somebody who's going to have clubs and swords and sharp arrows are going to hit people who talk about testifying falsely against his friend. So therefore, that's what's going to scare him. Amar Ravashi says, Yachli l'meimar, person might say, and Mefarshim would say this is erroneous, but somebody might think, Shev Shani Hava Mosana ve'inish below Shaneha, that a person, that even though there might be lots of death and suffering around, nobody dies in the wrong time, right? So therefore, Hashem's not going to take me before my time. Might be that there's lots of death and things surrounding, but I'm not worried about it. So, right, the inish below shaneha lo shachif. A person is not going to die in his wrong time. Elam Ravashi says this is what can scare a witness. Amar li nasan bar marzutra amrinan luhu sadi. This is what we tell the witnesses. Shakri a'ugraihu zili. Even people who hire false witnesses look at false witnesses with a low regard. You're considered a lowlife if you're a false witness that somebody can just hire. Dichsev, as the pasuk says, "Ve'yishivu shnaim anashim b'nei Belial." When the king Achav wanted to be able to get the property of his neighbor Novos Israeli, he decided to get some people to testify falsely about him, and then get him brought to a death sentence, and then that way he was going to be able to confiscate his property. Right? Not a nice thing to do. So they said, "Well, what are we going to do?" The people advised him, "Let's get two lowlifes." Let's get two low lives negdo against him via idu, and they'll testify against him more. Now, the thing is that what we see is that what really ultimately works, telling the people, if you're a lying witness, your reputation is low, and if you're going to say that, who cares? Nobody's going to ever find out. The people who hired you know. So therefore, your reputation gets around as a low life. So therefore, you don't want that. So, im amar hu, amar li, if he says, well, he told me, that's not going to be sufficient to have a testimony. Says we need to get established. The person has to be able to declare, you are my witnesses, and I am declaring in front of you that I officially owe the money. This supports what Rav Yehuda says. Rav Yehuda says in Rav, atem edai. Person must declare, you are my witnesses, in order for that to be a valid testimony. Itmar nami, we also have a statement of a Moraim that says the same thing. That a person says, I owe you 100. You owe me 100. Amar lo hein, he says, yes, I do. So he says, Lamachar Amar lo teneli. The person comes tomorrow and says, okay, give me the money. You said you owed me yesterday. Amar mishat anibach. I was just joking with you. You're coming and nudging me every day. Give me the money. Give me the money. Finally, I said, yeah, sure, I'll give you the money. But I don't mean it. So Potter, in that circumstance, that's not an admission. That's just what somebody says in order to get somebody to leave him alone. Tanya Nami Yachiv Abraisa says the same thing. Hamana li biyadech. Person says, you owe me 100. Amar lo. He says, yes. Lamachar amar lo. The next day he says, Tnehu li, give it to me. Amar lo b'shat anibach. I was just fooling with you. So Potter, he is exempt in that circumstance. V'lo, not only that, ella afil hichmin lo eidim acharei geter. Let's say the guy actually hides witnesses behind a wall nearby. Right? He's going to, I'm going to get him to say it, and I'm going to get these guys to listen to it, and then I'll have my witnesses. He hides witnesses behind the wall. Amar lo, and he says to him, Manali biyadech, you owe me 100. Amar lo, and he says, yes, I do. Ratzon chashatodeh bifnei ploni uploni. Do you want to testify? And do you want to give that? Do you want to say that out in front of witnesses so that I can bring you to court and get that to pay? Amar lo, he says to him, Misyarani shema tachpini ladin. So he says, no, I don't really want to because you may take me to court with those witnesses. So I don't really want to admit it in front of witnesses. Lamachar, the next day, Amar Lo, Taniu Li, he says, okay, give me the money. Amar Lo, Mishatini Bach, I was just fooling with you. Patra, he's exempt. Right? Because that's just what people say when they're trying to get people to leave them alone. Vein tonin lemesis. However, you are not allowed to make a claim on behalf of somebody who is trying to encourage others to do avodah zarah. Okay, well, mesis man kashmei. Gemara wants to know, what are you talking about? We weren't talking about avodah zarah at all. All of a sudden, you just threw a random piece of information then about avodah zarah. What's going on here? So there's a missing piece of the brisa. Let's add some context. This is what it should say. If a person has a claim, let's say he comes to court and he says, the witnesses are saying, we heard him say that he owes them the money, and the guy doesn't respond that I was just joking. He doesn't have an answer to that. So we don't make a claim for him. He has to make his own claims. Right? If he says, the guy was pestering me every day, so I just said yes, even though I didn't mean it, then that's fine. We believe that. But if he doesn't say anything, and he's just got two witnesses against him, then we're going to believe the two witnesses. But that's not the case when it comes to life and death matters, right? Person is going to be facing a death penalty. Even if the person doesn't make the best claim that he has, toin and lo, the Beis Din says, you know what would be a good claim to protect him? He should have said this. He should have said this. So since he has a claim, even if he doesn't make the claim, the Beis Din has the responsibility to make those claims on his behalf. Vein toin and lemesis, but
how does that work? If
person has the opportunity to make a claim that would save himself from a death penalty,
right.
Even if he doesn't make the claim, right. Beis Din is going to make that claim on his behalf in order to protect him.
Make the claim?
Because he might not have thought of it. It might not even be true. Right? Beis Din is just going to throw out there, hey, maybe this happened, maybe that happened. As long as he's got an answer, as long as they have an answer, because that is their responsibility. We're going to see that when it comes to death sentence cases, the Beis Din has a responsibility trying to get every person not to get killed, right? That's what we're not trying to do. We're trying to absolve people to not hold them responsible for a death sentence. When it comes to money, not so. And the other case is not when it comes to a mesis. We don't make those claims when it's going to be talking about somebody who's trying to encourage other people to worship idols. Maishna mesis. Why is that case different? Amar Rav Chama bar Chanina. So Rav Chama bar Chanina said, "Mipirke de Reb Chia bar Abba Shmili," from the teachings of Reb Chia bar Abba, I heard the following: Shani mesis, a person who's encouraging others to do avodah zarah, is different. Because the pasuk says about them, "Lo tachmo v'lo tichasei alav." You shouldn't have mercy on this person. This don't cover anything up. That person just gets a regular straight court case. If he has no defense.
Interesting.
Because that avera is more serious. I'm Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman. Shmuel bar Nachman says, "I'm Rabbi Yonasan minayin she'ein tonin lemesis." How do you know that we don't make a claim on behalf of somebody who's encouraging others to do averos, specifically avodah zarah, but averos in general, if it seems from this context? Minachash, from the snake in Adam and Chava. Right? But minachash hakadmoni, the original snake, damar rab simloi, harbe ta'anos hayu l'nachash liton veloton. The snake had lots of self-defense claims he could have made in order to protect himself. Why didn't Hashem advance some of those claims on his behalf? Because he didn't make those claims. So we don't make the claims on behalf of the snake. He didn't make the claims. What claim could the snake have made in order to protect himself from being guilty? He could have said, Devrav, Divrei Atamid, Divrei Mishomim. He says, when you've got the master and you've got the students both telling you what to do, Divrei Harav Shom. When you listen to the rabbi, you don't listen to the students. So therefore, what are you going to claim, Chava, that the snake told you to do it? Well, Hashem told you not to do it. So why is it my fault that you listen to me instead of Hashem? So there was a claim.
Because the snake was the Yetzer Hara in this situation.
That's correct. The snake is Yetzer Hara, but it's not my fault that you listen to the Yetzer Hara. That was what he could have claimed. He didn't claim it. Therefore, he was held guilty and responsible. Okay, Amar Chizkiah, minayin shekol mosif goreya. How do we know that sometimes adding on things actually weakens things, right? Not best to add on every chumrah that you possibly can. Sometimes adding extra on makes things worse. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Amar Elohim lo tochlu mimenu v'lo tigubo. That Adam, when he told Chava didn't hear the original command from Hashem not to eat from the Eitz Hadas, so Adam had to tell it to her. So Adam told her, don't eat it, don't touch it. Don't touch it was a chumrah, right? That wasn't actually in the original commandment. So what happened is, the snake comes along and says to Chava, what is you not allowed to do? She says, I can't eat it, can't touch it. So he takes her hand, he pushes it against the tree. See, nothing happens. So therefore, if you can touch it, so then you can eat it. So she did. So therefore, you see that by adding on, you actually made the problem worse. Okay? Rav Misharshia says, actually, the source of it from here. when we talk about the size of the aron, it says amasayim v'chetzi arko is 2.5 amos long. So if you take the aleph off of the word amasayim, so then it turns into masayim. Masayim means 200. So if the aleph were removed, the size of the aron would actually be 200.5. So therefore, that would be much, much bigger. So the aleph, taking away the aleph, actually makes it much larger, right? So that's again. So if you add it on, you'd be goreh, you'd be taking away. Then another explanation is amasayim v'chetzi. If you take the vav away from v'chetzi, so then it would read that 2 amos is half of its width, which means that the total width would be 4, and it really is 2.5. Ravashi says, Ashtei Asrei Yerios. And it talks about the 11 curtains. So it says Ashtei Asrei, but if you take the ayin away, and then it will say Shtei Asrei, it will say 12. So by taking the ayin away, so then you'll wind up with 12 rather than 11, and that's not proper. Amar Abaye says, Lo shana ela de Amar mishatani bach. Right? Person has to say in court, right? 2 witnesses are coming and saying, we heard him we heard him admit it. So the guy's claim back is, no, I was just fooling him, right? I wasn't really serious about such a claim. We believe that claim, we said. Aval, Amar, however, if he says, Chav Tes Amud Beis, if he says to him, Lo hayudvar miolam, he says, this never happened at all. I never said such a thing at all. So then, Huchsa Kafra, now he's just contradicting witnesses, right? The witnesses said, he said it. You're going to come along and say, I didn't say it? If you said, you're right, I said it, but that wasn't what I meant, okay, so then you're not contradicting the witnesses. But if you're going to outright contradict the witnesses, so then you lose. Rav Papa Breder Rav Acha Bar Ada, so Rav Papa, the son of Rav Acha Bar Ada, said, Hachi Amrinan Mishmei Rav, this is what we say in the Rava, Kom Mili Dichti Lo Dikiri Inchi. Anything which is hollow and empty, nobody remembers. Your brain has an incredible ability to decide when information is not important. And when the information is not important, it forgets it. Therefore, if all you were doing was trying to push somebody off and you said, I'm just joking, you wouldn't remember your joke because it wasn't important to you. So therefore, when the witnesses come and say, you said it, he's going to say, I didn't remember it. And he's going to be right. He really didn't remember it. So the fact that he says he didn't remember isn't an indication that he's lying. It's just an indication that he was joking and he didn't remember it. So therefore, we're not going to call him a liar just because he says...
The joke means the joke wasn't really important.
That's correct. The joke wasn't really important. Exactly.
So much leniency. There's so much like psychology.
And correct, so much psychology.
In court, it'd be like, no, we have witnesses.
That's right.
It's interesting.
We actually want to get things right. Okay. There was somebody, he hid some witnesses in the bed curtains. I guess they used to have curtains surrounding their beds and the whatever for privacy in their bedrooms. So I don't know if they had bedrooms as much as they had a room that had beds in it. So they would have curtains around their beds for privacy. So they hid some people in the curtains. Omar Lay. So he said to him, Mana li biyodech, you owe me 100. Amar Lei, and he says, yes. Amar iri v'shachvi lehavi Allah Saad. He says, do you mind if everybody who's awake and who's asleep here is going to testify on my behalf? So Amar Leilo, he says, no, I don't want them to testify. So Amar Kana, ha Amar Leilo. Well, he said no, so therefore any of the witnesses that were secretly hiding are not valid. Hahu da'achmin edim bekivra lechavrei. There was once a person who hid some witnesses in a grave. Right? They were, I guess, in a graveyard or whatever, and they had dug some graves, and these guys got inside the grave in order to hide. Right? Amar lei manali b'yeich, you owe me 100. Amar lehin, he says, yes. Chayayu mesi lehavi Allah sadi. He says, well, the living and the dead could be the witnesses. He goes, Amar lei lo. He says, no, I don't want it. Amar Reb Shimon says, ha Amar lei lo. He said, no, so therefore it doesn't work. Amar Ravina v'tim Rav Papa. Ravina said to him, and some say it was Rav Papa, Shma Mina. From here, Shma Mina miha, ha de Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. This we see what Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav. Tzarch shiyomer atem eidai. You have to clearly state you will be the witnesses in order for those witnesses to actually testify in court that such an admission took place. Lo shna ki amar love, lo shna ki amar milve. It doesn't matter. B'shasik lova. It doesn't matter if the borrower said, let's get some witnesses and I will admit it, or whether the lender says, let's get some witnesses so you can admit it, and the person says nothing. If the borrower says nothing, then he's accepting it, right?
Let me ask you, try to use another example, a sota. So two people give them her chasra, and then the next time they see her go into stira with the guy, 2 different edim, that won't be admissible? Because
this is an admission of of financial culpability.
Oh, it's only referring to finance.
This is what we're talking about, right? An admission of financial culpability.
I just assumed it was in general. This is how.
Because witnesses who actually witness something, they're witnessing things. They're witnessing an event, right? Also, if witnesses saw the actual loan take place, they also, that's fine too. This is an admission. We're just trying to determine whether the person says, I owe you money, whether he's serious or not. Right? The person says that all the time without meaning it. That's the point. So Tama Damar lo velo, because in these cases, the reason why the witnesses were not valid is because the borrower said, no, I don't want the witnesses. If the guy would have kept quiet, then the witnesses would have been admissible.
Doesn't the borrower not want the witnesses because he doesn't want to pay back the money? Which is
That's a very good reason why he would not want it. Correct.
But that doesn't. But still, that seems to be even more to show that he's.
What, that he would be lying? Well, yeah, except what's he supposed to do what's he supposed to do if it's true? You're looking at it, that's what he would say if he's lying, but that's also what he would say if it's true.
But to keep it quiet about it, can that be another problem on its own?
He's not keeping quiet about it. He is keeping quiet about the fact that he's having witnesses. Right? By keeping quiet, we have a principle of shtika kohodah. If somebody says to you something, would you take care of this for me? Let's say I say, Yehuda, can you get me a cup of coffee? And you walk into the kitchen, I'm assuming you're getting me a cup of coffee. Because if you didn't want to get me one, you'd say, no, I'm busy, and walk into the kitchen. Then I would know you're not getting one, right? I understand, right.
The whole thing in jest, I'm not sure people admit that they owe money to other people just in jest.
Well, it depends on what kind of circumstances. If I came over to you, Aviv, you owe me money, and you're like, Rabbi Loiterman, I don't owe you money. Fine. Next day I walk in. Aviv, I owe you money. Oh, you owe me money. I don't owe you money, Rabbi Loiterman. After like a week, be like, fine, Rabbi, I owe you money. Okay? But you're not like saying it just leave me alone. I'm trying to daven shacharis, right? It's not like you're there to admit, right? So now you say, so I'm smart. I'm go, oh, wait. If somebody, and I've got a couple of guys hiding in the courtroom, would you admit it to me in front of witnesses? Then you say, no, I won't. That's not what I'm saying.
That's not
right?
admission to,
Do you see what I'm saying? Like, this is exactly what would happen if it was truthful. Okay? Hahu dehava karu le kav rashu. There was a guy who had a nickname. He was the one who had a kav of contracts. Kav is a large volume. He had this guy was like Mr. Stack of Debt. Okay, that was his nickname. Amar man masik bi ela ploni ploni. He goes, I don't know what everybody's talking about. I don't owe any money to anybody except for this guy and that guy. Just two guys. Okay, so what happens? Asutavu ladina kamei de Rav Nachman. So these two guys said, okay, fine. He admitted he owes this money. So let's take him to court and have him, based on that pronouncement, we'll get money from him. Rav Nachman says, Adam also shelo lahasbias atmo. Person might make an admission that he owes money, even if he doesn't, in order to be able to make sure that people know that he's not that rich. Right? Because rich people have their own problems.
Wow, that's a lenient.
Right?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So therefore, there's another good reason why somebody might admit to a debt that he doesn't really owe. There was a guy who was called the mouse who sleeps on money. Mice don't really benefit from sleeping on money.
Right.
So this guy also, he was a miser, basically had a pile of money, and he didn't do anything with it. When he was dying, Amar planyu planya masku bezuze. So he says, I owe so-and-so and so-and-so some money. That's what he said when he was dying. So Basar de Shachiv, after he died, also Tav'in Hu Yorshin. So these guys came and they made a claim against the heirs for the money. So also the Kami de Rabbi Yishmael, they came before Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yossi. Amar Lahu, he said to them, Ki amrin adam aso shelo lasbias atzmo hani mili mechayim. This idea that a person makes lies about his finances in order to make sure people don't think he's rich, that's only if the guy's alive, right? What does he gain? Avaliyachar misa lo, but as we always said, a person has more believability on his deathbed. Why would a person lie? What's he protecting? That people think he's rich? No, poor people are going to nobody's going to come with their crazy business ideas to him after he's dead. So therefore, there's no reason to lie. So paru palga, so the guys had the money. I guess they only had half the money, the heirs, so they paid half the money. Tavinu ledinu lidach palga. So then the guys came back and they said, time for us to pay us the other half. So they also lekame de Rav Chia, so they went back to Beis Din in order to force them to pay. This time the case came before Rav Chia. Amar lahu, he said to them, Kishem sha'adam also shelo lahaspias atzmo, kach adam also shelo lahaspias banav. Just like a person might not want to say that he's wealthy, a person might not want to obligate his children to make his children seem wealthy for the same reason. People are going to come to his kids. So therefore, maybe he wasn't serious. So therefore, you don't have to pay.
someone just wear regular clothing to make you look like you're.
Well, he's going to wear regular clothing, but he's also going to say, I owe people money. You know, it looks like I'm rich, but I'm not really. I owe so many people money. Amruleh, Nezav Nidar. So he says, great, let's get the money back we gave. Right? Let's go get, right? Give us, we already paid half. Let's get the money back. Amar Lahu, he said to them, Kvar Horazaki, no Rabbi Yishmael, he wasn't wrong. This is what we call a halacha din of shikol hadas, where a judge could have decided either way. It's all dependent on the judge's analysis of the case. So therefore, when Rabbi Yishmael now analyzed the case, he decided that you're chayiv. I'm analyzing the case, decided that you're not. What you've paid already is valid. So that you're not going to get back. But I'm not going to obligate you to pay the other half. And that was how they left it. Let's say that two guys are witnessing a transaction, and now they make a kinyan as part of the transaction, right? I'm handing the money, and now they pick it up, and they show that this is a official transfer. So kosvin, this is a rule that when there is a kinyan present, then that is a fully established transaction, and the witnesses have the right to write a contract. The lender is going to write the contract. The witnesses are going to sign the contract. The lender has the right, based on the kinyan, to write a contract. And contracts are better because obviously you can collect on them. They're also better because they can help you collect from land that's sold in the meantime afterwards, right? So you're allowed to write a contract based on that kinyan. Ve'im lav, but if they never made a kinyan, ein kosvin, then the malva has no right to write a contract without the permission of the borrower, right? Because a person might prefer to have what's called a milva al peh, an oral loan. As it says, it doesn't require he doesn't get to be able to collect from properties that he sells in the meantime. It requires the witnesses in order to collect. So the lova has more rights. If they don't make a kinyan at the time of the transaction, then the lova has more rights and they're not going to be able to write such a contract. Now, bifnei shlosha v'lo kanu. Let's say there's three people, not two witnesses. Now it's three people. Now, when you have three people, it's almost like a beis din already, right? So they have additional powers that witnesses don't have. So they don't make a kinyan. Nevertheless, a beis din has the right of what's called hefker beis din hefker. They can transfer property without a kinyan. So now what happens? So Lo kanu miyoda, they didn't make a kinyan. So Rav Amar Kosvin, Rav says, those three people can write a contract anyway even without a kinyan. For Ravasi Amar Ein Kosvin, Ravasi says we do not. Hava Uvda, there was once a case, V'chosh lo Rav lahod Ravasi, and Rav was following what Ravasi says, that we're not going to write such a contract, even with three people there. Amar Ravada Barava says, Ha Odisa Zimnin Kasvinin Zimnin Lo Kasvinin. He says, on this kind of an admission, this contract, so he says, sometimes we're going to write it, sometimes we're not going to write it. It all depends. So if a person's going to test, someone's going to walk in and say, I admit I owe the money, sometimes we can write it in a contract, sometimes not. So that is if you're admitting it in front of three. Kenifi v'yasvi lo kasvina. Let's say a guy walks into the shul and there happens to be three guys sitting there. So he says, great, you guys will be my witnesses. They say yes. Great, I owe him money. Okay, now you can write, you cannot write that. Why? Because those guys are witnesses. Kanfinhu Ihu kasvinon. However, if the guy goes around going, I need you, I need you, I need you, three guys come here, let's sit down, now they're basing. What's the difference? If I would have walked in shul, I would have seen two guys, I would have used them as my witnesses. The fact of the matter is three guys were here. So therefore, I'm not going to say, you, get out of here. I'm just going to testify. No, there are three guys here. So fine, three guys is as good as two guys. But if I went out of my way in order to get three guys, because they weren't together, and I went and gathered three guys, that means I wanted a beis din specifically. And by wanting a beis din, it shows that I'm authorizing it to be written, right? Because I wanted an action of beis din.
Interesting.
Okay? Rava Amar, afilu kan finu, even if he gathered an ihu, even if he gathered them together, lo kasminan, we do not write the contract, adamar hu havu alai daini, unless he makes a pronouncement. He says, I officially designate you as judges. Because even the fact that he gathered them together doesn't necessarily indicate that he wants them to act as a beis din. Marbar Rav Ashi, Amar Rav Ashi says, afilu amar havu alai daini, lo kasminan, even if he says, you should be my judges, we still don't write that contract. Unless those three people actually sit down and establish themselves as a regular court that meets in a certain place, and they do court actions like sending messengers out and doing court action type things. Then they become a court, and then it's expected that they could write their contract down. But otherwise, you just happen to randomly gather three people together, that's not going to be considered enough of a court for you to take the authority upon yourself to write a contract down without permission of the borrower. Next, hold him in metaltali v'konomi yodo. Now, we said that if you admit that you owe the money and you make a kinyan, right, with a movable object, kosvin, then we can write the contract. Vim lav, if however there's no kinyan, ein kosvin, then we're not going to write it because we don't know whether he intended that to be written down or not. Bemer karkoi, but when it comes to land, the lo kana miyadu, and you don't make a kinyan, what will be the halacha there? Now, land has two different things about it that make it more likely that you wouldn't need a kinyan. First of all, you can't pick up a piece of land in order to say, here, it's my land, right? With a movable object, you can. So therefore, the fact that you don't make a kinyan on the land proves less than not making a kinyan on the movable object, right? The second thing is, wherever the people are, the land stays in the same place. So that land is considered as though it can always be in the possession of the person who owns it. The original owner, right? Fact is, I'm lending it to you to use it. But if you're going to admit that it's mine, then it's mine whoever it's sitting there. It's mine. I don't need to make a kinyan, right? So therefore, there's two different things about land that make land less likely to need a kinyan in order for it to be collectible.
Yeah, but the concern is the chazak that they could claim later. Be like, well, I've lived here for 3 years. This is my land.
There's not a chazak issue. This is where we're going to wind up writing the contract based on his admission.
No,
the guy admits.
Right.
I don't need to prove it with a chazaka. I'm right here, right now, admitting it's yours. Right? So I'm not trying to prove it's mine. If I was proving it's mine, I'd bring a chazaka. I'm admitting it's yours. The question is, can we write it down?
Right.
Okay? So Amemar Amar Ein Kosvin. Amemar says we do not write such a thing. We don't write it down. Even in land. Marzucha Amar Kosvin. Marzucha says we do write such a thing. V'hilchasa, the halacha is, Kosvin, we write it. Ravina Ikla Le De Meharya. Ravina went to a place called De Meharya. Amar le Rav Ami bar Rav Huna mi de Maharya. So Rav Dini bar Rav Huna, who was from de Maharya, who was there, said to Ravina, Metaltali ve'isnehu bainahu. Okay, this issue about the land aside, let's say we do write down the land. What if the guy says that mug that you're holding right now, you owe it to me, right? So the guy says, okay, you're right. So now, can I write that down? Because like land, it's right here. But unlike land, I can make a kinyan. So which way do we look at it?
You have any witnesses?
There are witnesses right here, yes, but now we're still deciding that with the witnesses, can you write a contract? So, what's the halacha there? Amar le kemer karkai damu. He says it's like land because it's right there. It's as though it's collected. It's sitting right here in front of you at the time of the transaction. Therefore, you can write the contract. Ravashi Amar Ravashi says kaven de mechasri guvaina lo. He says no. You haven't collected it yet. You haven't handed it to him, so therefore there's no kinyan, and therefore, no, you still don't write it down for movable objects. You can't write it down without specifically making a kinyan. He odisa delo hava kosuv ba amar lana kasvu v'chasmu. There was this contract on it. There was an admission contract. There were two witnesses signed on it, and it didn't have in the contract a statement saying that these witnesses were told to write it down. Okay, so now, the Havu le Abaye v'Rava Damar Tavayu, both Abaye and Rava said about this, that Hainu de Reish Lakish, this is what Reish Lakish says. Now, it's not what Reish Lakish said, but it's the idea of what Reish Lakish says is going to tell us what's the rule by this contract. Damar Reish Lakish says, Chazaka ein ha'edim chosmin al shtar elim ki nasek godol. When it comes to the contract, do we have to write in the contract that the person who's making the sale is 20 years old? We know that you had to be a certain age in order to be able to sell land. Do we have to write that in the contract? Ideally, it's a good idea. Let's say it's not written in the contract. Is the contract invalid? No, we presume that the witnesses knew that you needed a 20-year-old. So they wouldn't have written the contract unless they knew that the people who were involved were appropriate to make this contract.
Where would you have to find the proof?
Of what?
If they write down their age, you assume that.
Honestly, this Adam thing scares me to death. Because back then, they would travel for, like, men would go on 4-month trips to, let's say, India to do a business deal. People die. Your whole thing
I would wonder. I was thinking that people probably traveled a lot less, right. and even in traveling, they probably had established trade routes and established, that people would go. People would know. It seems like witnesses didn't disappear as much, right? Cities were smaller in size. They didn't have cities with like 10 million people.
To do trade, people who did trade must have had to go
those
much
people,
farther.
yes, right.
Right, and then people also died. So you have no recording. Like, what happens when an aide passes away? You have one aide, the other one's an iftar. Is it considered a testimony?
Yeah.
So that's why, like, especially with land, somebody says, I have I've been here for 3 years.
Get your
You're
that's why you have getting contracts certified in court is a good idea, right? If I wrote my contracts, then I went to that city and I said, look, I can bring some witnesses. This is this guy's signature, and I can certify my contract. I don't need to bring the original witnesses back.
Right. Yeah.
So there are ways around it to protect you, right? But it is, it was definitely a word of mouth sort of circumstance. Okay, so now, fine. So now that when we have a contract that's written, we presume that everything was written about it correctly, then that means the same thing here. Even though they left out the line saying that he gave us permission to write the contract down, we can presume the fact that the contract is written means that they gave permission. And therefore, we don't have to worry about invalidating the contract. Maskif lo Rav Papi, v'itema Rav Huna, braid Rav Yeshua. So either Rav Papi or, some said it was Rav Huna, braid Rav Yeshua asked the question, Mi ika midi, de anan lo yad inon, v'safri de beidina lo yadi. Says, I don't understand what you're saying. This idea of, look, we just had a whole back and forth argument about whether, under what circumstances a person can write a contract based on whether the person said, I give you permission, or I didn't give you permission. He was in front of the witnesses. The other guy said no. We had this whole page of back and forth. And you're telling me that despite the fact that the rabbis argued on this point all page long, that the Sofrim wouldn't have made a mistake and written a contract that they shouldn't have written. That's what you're telling me? I have a hard time. The rabbis, high level, Sofrim, I mean, they would make a mistake. So, Sha'ilinu lisifrei da Abaye. So they asked Abaye's court contract makers, V'yadi l'safri, and then V'yadi, and they knew all the halachos. L'safri, they asked the Safri de Rava, they asked the ones in Rava's court, V'yadi, and they knew. So sometimes you're an expert in your field, right? If you know how to write contracts, you know all the rules of writing contracts. The Sofrim knew all the rules of writing the contracts. Right. So therefore, if you went to a Sofer and said, write this contract for me, they would have asked, did you have permission or this? 2 witnesses, did you get permission? They would have asked and everything would have been okay. You can rely on the fact that the contract is written, that it was done properly. Hahi Odisa, Dehava Ksiv Bei Duchrun Piskami. There was a contract that was written in it in a language which sounded like it was written by a court. Okay? It was written with the language doch. These are the words that are to be remembered, not rather than this is a pronouncement of testimony. And we're going to turn to Daf Lamed Amud Aleph. V'chol lishni de beidina. The whole contract was written. It looked like a court document. Okay, v'lo hava ksiv ba b'mosif tlasa havina v'chad leisohi. But there was a line missing that would have helped. There were only 2 witnesses signed on it, and they were trying to figure out where's the third guy. So what we had learned before was that when you have a basin and one guy's not there, you write on the contract, this was the number of people in the basin. 2 of us are signing because the third guy wasn't here the day we signed. Okay, but then we would know it was a contract from a basin and that they had permission to sign it. So Savar Ravina Lameimar Hainu de Reish Lakish. Ravina said, well, it's like Reish Lakish. They made a mistake. They didn't write that line in the contract, but it's okay, right? Amar Le Rav Nasan Bar Ami. Rav Nasan Bar Ami says, Hachi Amrina Mishmei de Rava. This we said in the name of Rav. Rava Kol Kihai Gavna Chayshin LeBasin Tolin. No, in this kind of a circumstance, we have to be worried that the basin made a mistake. This is not like what Reish Lakish says that we can assume everything's okay. Now we have to assume that there were only 2 judges here somehow. The basin made a mistake. They had no right to sign it, and it was all a mistake. Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, Ikosev ba beidina to lo tzarech. He says, but if they wrote in the contract that we are a basin, then you don't have to worry about any more. Why? Because everybody knows a basin is 3. That much everybody knows. So therefore, if they wrote, we are acting as a court, fine. The mistake could have been that 2 people who were witnesses were acting as though they were a court when they were not. And they wrote all this contract down as though they thought they were a court, but they were not. But once they write, we are a court, then you can assume that there were 3 people and only 2 signed it and they left that one line out.
So you think the basin made a mistake by signing it? Did they get punished? Or?
No, because the contract is still valid. Right? Contract is still valid. The Dilma based in Chotzafu. Who says that they didn't make another mistake, which is that we have a concept of a based in. They were a what do we call it? A chutzpah. A based in. Yeah, what do we call it? Arrogance, or they acted inappropriately, right? The based in acted inappropriately. To Amar Shmuel told us Shnaim shedanu din hen din elo shnikru based in chotzav. 2 people sit down as a based in. Because we learned at the beginning of the Gemara that really you only need 1, potentially according to some opinions, in order to be able to judge these monetary cases. We are required 3, but if you only had 2, then that would be acceptable, except that you are violating rabbinic enactments that required the 3. So we said it was a valid beis din. So therefore, maybe this was two people and they were acting inappropriately. And so maybe the contract's not valid. So the answer is because of Beidina de Ravna Ashti. The answer is because they wrote in there not just that they were a beis din, but that they were a beis din from Rav Ashi's court. So therefore, if they were a beis din from Rav Ashi's court, you presume that they knew what they were doing. V'dilma Rabbanan debe Rav Ashi kishmuel svira luhu. Maybe the rabbis in Rav Ashi's court hold like Shmuel and say that you can have a beis din that has two, and then we don't hold like them, and now this is an invalid contract. So the answer is it says v'amar lon Rav Naashi, that Rav Ashi gave us permission to write this contract. So therefore they know that Rav Ashi knows the halacha and that the beis din was acting appropriately and properly, even though they left the line out saying that one of us was missing. We know that it was a proper court, and therefore it's okay.
They lied when they paid Rav Ashi's name?
They could have lied, but then you're dealing with any kind of forged document, right? We have rules about dealing with forged documents anyway. It's hard to forge a court document because you can just go to the court and say, is this yours? Right? Tanarabban. Amar lehen echad, ani ra'isi avichem shehit min mos b'shida tevel migdal. Person comes along and he says, I saw your father hiding money in a container, in a carriage, a closet, a chest, right? V'amar shel ploni hein. And then he says, and that money that he was hiding belongs to so-and-so. So now, do you believe him or not? Or shel meiser sheni hein. Or this was money that was supposed to be meiser sheni, you got to eat it in Yerushalayim. Meiser sheni hein babayis. So babayis lo mar klum. If the money is in that person's house, then that's not a statement that has any meaning. Basadeh, but if the money is in a field, devar of kayamin, then his words stand. Why? Because kol shadavar, the rule is like this: kol shabiyodo litlon devar of kayamin. If this guy was wanted to steal the money, then if the money was accessible in a place that all it was hidden, but this guy knows where it is. So if it was just accessible, then this guy must be telling the truth. Because if he wanted to steal it, he'd just dig it up and steal it. So the fact that he comes to court saying that your father hid it, and here it is, and it belongs to so-and-so, that must mean he's telling the truth. It's like a pesher also pesher.
I was about to say the first statement.
Right?
The fact it was buried hidden in the field, that's a simon on its own, no?
That is a simon that he is telling the truth because he could get it himself. However, if it was in the safe, there's money in your father's safe at home, and it belongs to so-and-so, it doesn't prove anything, because this could be a scheme. He's one guy, and he's making a scheme in order to claim something. So then, ein biyodo litlon, if he has no way of getting this, lo amar klum, then his statement is meaningless. There were some kids, if they were adult children or whatever, they saw their father was putting some money away in a carriage, a chest, or a closet somewhere. V'amar shel ploni hein, and he says to his kids, it doesn't belong to me, it belongs to so-and-so. Or hein shel meiser sheni.
It belongs to someone else. Is it like he stole it from someone else?
No, he borrowed it potentially, or maybe the guy said, hold this for me in a safe place, right? He's not a thief, right? Or he says it belongs to meiser sheni. Im kemosher dvarav, if the father was telling this to them as though he was giving over information, he says, listen guys, I want you to know this belongs to so-and-so, just so you should be aware of that. So then dvarav kayamin, then you're going to believe the father's words. Im kema'arim, so if it was like the father was telling them this just so in order to be able to fool the kids, so that they wouldn't think, oh, that's where dad keeps the money, let's go get it in order to be able to help ourselves to some stuff. So lo mar klum, then the father's statement is meaningless, and then when the father passes away, the kids can keep the money. There was once a person who was upset that his father left him money, he didn't know where it was. Okay, so he's all worried about it. And the angel of dreams came to him at night, and said to him, Kach v'kach, hein, this is how much money it is, b'malkum ploni, and this is where it is. So he has a dream, and he discovers it. And he says, but hein shel meiser sheni. He says, this money belongs to meiser sheni. Hein zeh haya, but he says, sorry, but hein b'malkum ploni hein, shel meiser sheni hein, but they belong to meiser sheni, right? I'll tell you how much it is, where it is, but it isn't yours. Okay? This story actually happened. V'omru, and the beis din paskind divrei chalomos lo malin v'lo meridin. The angel of dreams has no court value, right? The fact of the matter is, you walked outside, dug exactly where the guy showed you, where the dream said, and you found the money. Only proves one thing, that we learned that there are always some element of truth in dreams and a lot of nonsense in dreams. You don't know which part is the truth, which is the nonsense. So therefore, if the fact is that it was lying there, that's the true part, right? The fact that it was meiser sheni, that could be your brain making stuff up. So you don't know which is the real things, which part to believe and which part to not. Doesn't mean anything, right? So it doesn't become Pesha Osir Pesha Hitter by Baal Cholomos, right? You have a dream, it doesn't prove anything in court. Okay? Shnayim Omrim Zakai. Now we have the next case. We had two people who say you win the case, or two people say you lose the case. Michtav Heichi Kasvi. How do the judges write their decision? So Rabbi Yochanan Amar Zakai. Rabbi Yochanan says, period. You win. That's it. Reish Lakish Amar Ploni Ploni Mizakin and Ploni Michayev. These two judges said you win. These two judges say you lose. This one judge said you lost. Okay, that's how you're gonna record it. Rabbi Elazar Omar. Rabbi Elazar says Midivrayim Nizdakia Ploni. That based on the back and forth, it wasn't unanimous, but so and so wins. But he doesn't record who says which side. So now let's my benayu. What is the point of argument between these sides? Eke benayu l'shlumi ihu manso bahadaihu. The question is the judge who got. Let's say the court case turns out to be wrong. So that means the two people said that you owe the money. Now they have to repay the person who lost the case. Right? The judges have to pay out of their pocket. He said. Right. So the question is the person, the judge who got the case right, does he have to pay also? Okay. Dilman Damar Zakai, according to the one who says that you just write Zakai Mishalim. Doesn't matter, you're part of the basin. So you've got to pay. Ulaman Damar Ploni Ploni Mizakin Ploni Ploni Mechayvin. The reason why you write down in the court settlement who answered which side is because when you got to go back and figure out who's got to pay, this guy doesn't pay Lo Mishalim because he got the case right. Right? So if you're right, you don't have to pay. Ulaman Damar Zakai, according to the opinion, says that he pays Mishalim, he has to pay that that all three judges pay. Lemalu, why doesn't the judge who got it right say to them, Ila Didi Tsaisison, why should I pay? If you guys had listened to me, Atunami Lo Shalmison, you wouldn't have to pay either. It's not my fault that you paid. Why am I responsible for paying when you guys messed up? So rather, that's not the argument. That makes perfect sense. Why would the judge who got it right have to pay? So rather, the issue is like this. The question is, do the two judges have to combine together and pay the extra third that the last judge isn't responsible for because he got it right? According to the opinion that says that they're Zakai, so then they're going to have to combine together and they're going to have to pay the extra amount. They're not going to have to pay. Right? So then there's no reason the reason why we need to know who are the judges that got it wrong is because they have to pay up the extra amount, right? And so this guy, but according to the opinion, it says Mishalmi, so they don't have to pay it. So therefore, what difference does it make, right, to be able to find out who is responsible, who isn't? Why do the judges who got it wrong have to pick up the extra third on behalf of the other judge? They should be able to say to the other judge, wait a second, if you weren't with us participating in the case in the first place, we wouldn't have to pay it all either. It's kind of your fault that we're in this mess. So therefore, that shouldn't work. Ella ikabeinahu, rather the case is mishum lo teich rachel be'amecha. The issue of concern is, can you speak Lashon Hara? Is it a rechilus to be able to share the result of the court case? Rabbi Yochanan Amar Zakai. Rabbi Yochanan says you just say Zakai. Mishum lo teich rachel. You're not allowed to specify who said what, right? You don't want to make somebody Reish Lakish Amar Ploni Ploni Mizakin Ploni Ploni Michayvin. Mishum demichse kishikra. You got to specify who said what, because otherwise the court case looks false, right? You can't say everybody said Zakai. That's not true. This guy said this guy said this. You got to specify it out. Rabbi Elazar, Islay Demar, Islay Demar. Rabbi Elazar says, both of you are making a good point. I don't want to specify and embarrass tell the judges who said what. On the other hand, I also don't think that you want to make it look like it was unanimous. Hilkach kasvi hachi midivrayim nizdakeponi. Therefore, that's what you write from midirabanan. Well, that what's it called? That they from the conversation these rabbanan had. We are going to decide the case which was not unanimous. That way, it's true, and we don't out anybody. Gamru es hadavar. Then the Mishnah says that once they come to the conclusion, so then they bring everybody in. So Leman, who are we bringing in here? Elaine and Lambale Dinin. If we're talking about bringing in the litigants, so Hasam Kaimi, they were already standing there the whole time. They never left the court, right? They're there the whole time. El Liadim, we're talking about the witnesses, right? We brought in one witness, then we told him to go out. Then we brought in the second witness, and then he left. At the end, we bring all the witnesses back. Come on. So who's that like? Delok Rabbi Nosson. It does not follow Rabbi Nosson's opinion. What it sounds like they're doing is they bring one witness in, he testifies, then they brought him out. Then they brought the second witness, and he testifies. Then they bring both witnesses back. Now that we've already decided the case, we bring both witnesses back, and we make them testify in front of each other. Because we're going to see the rationale behind why. They have to be testifying together. And that doesn't agree with what Rabbi Nosson says. Tanya, we learn in a brisa. Their testimony does not combine together unless the witnesses are able to see each other. They're testifying together. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha says, even if one can testify after the other, that's still okay. Right? They don't have to be physically present simultaneously, right? But based in as far as the being a witness, right? They both have to witness the event at the same time, right? We're going to see why. And to which Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha says, even if they witness, one witnesses it and then the other witnesses the rest of it afterwards. And then we said that that they can't testify in court unless they're testifying together. Rabbi Nosson says, not true. One guy can come and testify today, and then the other witness can come tomorrow, and that's okay. So therefore, this statement at the end of our Mishnah that says we bring the witnesses back together at the end of the case, it's not like Rabbi Nosson, because he says you don't need that. You can have one guy one day, one guy the other day, and that's fine. So not true. Liolam lebali dinin, we're bringing back the litigants. It is the litigants. We're not bringing back the witnesses. For Reb Nechemya, it's Reb Nechemya's opinion to time these were in a Bryce. Reb Nechemya says, Kachaya min hagon shel niki hadas sheb Yerushalayim. This is the pure-minded people in Yerushalayim had the following custom when it came to the courts. Machnisim lebali dinim. We would bring, this was the procedure. You would bring the litigants into the case, v'shomim divrehen, and then you'd hear their respective cases. Umachnisim nasa edim, then you bring in the witnesses, v'shomim divrehem, and you take the testimony from the witnesses. Umotzian osan lechutz. You get everybody outside. Everybody leaves. Venosin badavar. Then they would have a discussion with nobody in the room, right? The judges would have their own private conversation, not in front of everybody. Gamros adavar machnis nosan. Then when they made their judgment, when they finally concluded their discussion, they would bring everybody back in. V'hatanya, we're in a brisa. Gamros adavar machnisin esa edim. But we have a brisa that says that when they completed the case, they would bring the witnesses back. He delok Rabbi Nosson. You're right. That doesn't follow Rabbi Nosson's opinion, right? Rabbi Nosson says it's not. You don't need the witnesses there. This brisa seems to make it clear. Our Mishnah though could be talking about the litigants, not necessarily the what do you call it?
Not the witnesses.
Not the witnesses. Thank you. Gufa. Back on what we were discussing, we mentioned the witnesses have to witness the event that they're witnessing simultaneously. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha says, even if they witness one after the other. But my kamifti, what is the point of their disagreement? It might be a pasuk, it could be logical. Let's talk about what the logic is. Amana de kamasid high, lo kamasid high. Umana de kamasid high, lo kamasid high. When you've got two witnesses, one says, I saw him pay 100, and the two witnesses were not there simultaneously. One says, I saw the loan of 100, and another witness says, I was there by myself, I saw a loan of 100. They might not be talking about the same loan. So you're talking, we have one witness, it could be two different loans. This could have happened at 5 in the afternoon, and this happened at 7 in the evening. So therefore, you're one witness talking about one situation, and you're one witness talking about a completely different situation. We don't have two witnesses on something.
Can't you qualify it? I mean, you could ask the witnesses questions to make it.
Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha says, I don't care. I don't have to ask. It doesn't matter. It doesn't bother me. Why? Ve'idach amana biyama tarvahu k'masadi. He says, I don't care. You're testifying that he owes him 100. You're testifying he owes 100. You're both testifying he owes 100. So that's fine.
Right, but it doesn't necessarily.
It doesn't have to be the same loan.
You still have to you don't have to qualify the witnesses. That it's the same. You're
right. It's the same. Obviously, this person owes this person. That's the critical part of the testimony. But not that this loan is the same loan. Just that we are both coming to hereby testify that Reuven owes Shimon $100. That's fine. Okay, that's Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha's point. That's the logic argument between the 2 points. Others say that it is a pasuk. The pasuk says, "V'hu aid o ra'a o yada." He is a witness, and he sees or he knows. Vitanya, we learn in a brayso, mimashna shenemar lo yakum aid, when the pasuk says that a witness should not stand. Ini yodea shehu echad, it says lo yakum aid echad, one witness should not stand. But why does it have to say one witness? Obviously, when it says aid, that's singular. Therefore, why does it have to say aid echad? Matam lomar echad. Why is it telling me that? Zebana av. This is a rule that the Torah is telling us in all circumstances. Kol makom shenemar aid. Anytime the word aid is used in the Torah, Hare Kanshnaim, it always refers to a pair of witnesses, not a single witness. Ad sheyifrat lecha kasav echad, unless the Torah writes one. If the Torah writes one witness, then it's one witness. If the Torah writes witness, then it means two. So therefore, va'afke rachmana b'lashon chad lamemar ad dechazu tarvayu kechad. The reason why the Torah always uses the language of witness in the singular is to tell me that the testimony, whatever it is that they are witnessing, they have to witness it simultaneously as one. That is the pasuk. Ve'idach. Now Rabbi Shua ben Karcha says no. Vehu aid o ra'a o yada mikol makom. The pasuk says the witnesses, they've got to see it, they've got to know about it. Doesn't have to be simultaneously. They're just talking about they're just witnessing a testimony, and that is doesn't prove anything. We'll try at least to get to Amud Beis, so we go page and a half. Ve'ein eduson miskayemes bebeistin ad she'idu shnehem ke'echad. So the first opinion says their testimony does not stand until they testify in court simultaneously. Reb Nosson Omar shomin dvarav shel zeh hayom u'kashiv yavo chaveiro lemachar shomin dvarav. Rabbi Nosson said they don't even have to testify together. So now we've got two machlokas, we have to point them out. We have between the Tanna Kamma and Rabbi Shua ben Karcha about whether they have to witness it simultaneously. And now the machlokas here between the Tanna Kamma and Rabbi Nosson about whether they have to testify simultaneously. But my kamiflagi, what is the point of that argument? It might be logical, it might be a pasuk. If it was logical, Mar Savar Eid Echad, Ki Asi L'Shvua, Asi L'Mamona Lo Asi. If one witness comes to testify, what can he do? He can obligate the person to make an oath. But one witness can't obligate somebody to pay. So therefore, when the one witness shows up to court and he's by himself, testifying by himself, he thinks, I'm obligating you to pay money. He didn't know his testimony was that serious that he's actually obligating a person to pay. So there, the witness has to be aware of the seriousness of his testimony. So therefore, if he comes by himself, it doesn't count. He's got to come together with everybody he's testifying, so he knows he's part of a group. The other one says, Eve says, what? Even if two witnesses were come simultaneously to the court, they're not speaking simultaneously. Obviously, one guy's going to talk, and then the other guy's going to talk. So therefore, what difference does it make if one guy talks today and one guy talks tomorrow, rather than one guy talks and then the other guy leaves and then the other guy comes in? We're going to combine these two guys together, even though they're not talking simultaneously. Hachanami lit sarfinhu. We're going to combine them together. Otherwise, it could be a pasuk. Pasuk says the pasuk says im lo yagid v'nasa avono. When it comes to taking a shvuas ha'edim, if somebody has testimony, they have to testify. And if somebody believes that they have witnesses and the witnesses are refusing to testify, they can make him take an oath. Now, these guys testify. We don't know anything, and then they're lying. So that's what this pasuk is talking about. So pasuk says if he does not say, then he has Nevera. So Udakuliyam, so therefore, this says that he has Nevera. Udakuli Amma, Karabanan depligi alei Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. Everybody is agreeing with the Rabbanan who argue with Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. So that means that they agree that they have to watch, the witness has to see the testimony together. The argument is, do we connect what they see to how they testify? Mar Savar Makshin Hagadol L'Riyah, Mar Savar Lo Makshin. One opinion is that the two things are together, right? They have to witness it together, and then they have to testify together. The other opinion says, no, they have to witness it together, but they can say it separately. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha is the one who says they don't have to see it together. And then we're going to ask, well, what does he hold about whether they can testify together? It seems pretty obvious, though, that what they're going to say is, and that's what we're going to start with tomorrow, is the story that they're going to testify that he doesn't have to testify together. You don't have to see it, you don't have to testify together.
Why though? Like, I don't understand, why does the witness get to choose that?
Why does the witness get to?
They have an obligation. They witness it. What is it? Why is it?
I guess you have to. A person could walk into court and realize that he is that especially